The last time Bitcoin was above 1 trillion market cap, we only stayed there for about like 5 months cumulatively. Obviously, from something like mid March to mid May of 2021. So you got 3 months there, and then that final kind of breath in October to November. And so cumulatively, we've only been above Bitcoin's market cap prior to where we are prior to this cycle for about 5 months. You compare that to today, and we've held above $1 trillion market cap for almost 8 months. And so that's already in and of itself a really welcome development. Bitcoin's price during 2020, 2021, 2022, obviously you had the entire cycle. The story was FTX. And then the grand resolution of the cycle when we finally bottomed out was the flushing of all of those really bad players. And we kind of chopped around and had to find our base a little bit more. There were no real catalysts because the Fed was still on hold. Other risk markets were doing quite well. And then Bitcoin finally woke up, and now it's above $1 trillion market cap, and it's been there for the last 8 months. And so the longer Bitcoin stays above a $1 trillion market cap, the more cemented it becomes as a real player in global finance. We talk about things like gold and the S&P 500. S&P 500 is sitting at like over $40 trillion in market cap right now. I think like $45 trillion market cap. Gold sitting at like 12, 13, 14, $15 trillion market cap. The longer that Bitcoin stays above this psychological milestone of 1 trillion, I think the more official it becomes in the eyes of, TradFi and these investors who've been playing in markets for several decades. So it's all good, even though the dollar price is not where we want it to be. And on an inflation adjusted basis, we still have not really broken all-time highs. The longer it stays above $1 trillion nominally, I am happy. And really the last 7 months of price action since we did hit that all-time high in March has been very constructive. Brandon, you've been in the market for ages. You've been seeing Bitcoin for a very long time. The longer it spends in these zones, the more coins move from those flighty bull market participants who are buying just for the sake of getting in while the price is going up to people who are holding it for its value in the long run. And that builds a stronger base for the remainder of this cycle and for future cycles to come. It builds out a base for Bitcoin's price to move higher in this cycle. Then also it serves as a floor that people are willing to get back in and bid up the market in future cycles. And so it's all good stuff. It's certainly not what a lot of people would like to see, but I think just zooming out and appreciating that we've been at or around or above $60,000 Bitcoin for almost 8 months straight now is a very, very good thing. A lot of the gains Bitcoin was supposed to make this year were front loaded to the beginning of the year when the ETFs launched. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's a great deal of short interest right now on MicroStrategy. And so there's a great deal of short interest, and people are trying to squeeze those shorts out of the market. And that's driving a lot of shorts out of their positions and driving MicroStrategy's price up while Bitcoin kind of moves down. And so, I do think that there is a great deal of short pressure in the market. People don't want to see this thing succeed. But I think the main reason is just zooming out. We have an election coming up in 25 days. We say it's the most consequential one of our lifetimes every single cycle, but I think this one more so than most. I generally do not get political, but the reality is here in this country, and I'm definitely feeling it in Massachusetts, is we've had, the estimate is 20 million plus illegal migrants. If you go back in time and you look at real data, it's probably closer to 60 million people who are in this country that shouldn't be here, that are here illegally. And so people are viewing this election as extremely consequential, and as such, price action in the most high beta, right, the most high sensitive risk assets such as Bitcoin is very muted, and that reflects a lot of kind of will they, won't they mentality. People don't want to dive into the market and go fully long because of the uncertainty revolving around the election. That's not to say that if Kamala Harris gets elected, Bitcoin's going to zero. But certainly she has less of an accommodative framework toward Bitcoin and other crypto stuff than Donald Trump does. And so I do think that because it's such a toss-up, and also generally during elections, you do have this kind of uncertainty that drives more muted price action. Until the election happens and we move past that, I think we're probably in for a very boring October. It was looking like we were setting up really well for October at the start of the month. We had the best September on record for Bitcoin. And so historically, October has been Bitcoin's best month. But given that we're headed into an election year, and given that the launch of the ETFs at the start of the year really drove a lot of capital into Bitcoin over the first 3-4 months, that probably would have trickled into Bitcoin more gradually over this year, we probably would have experienced more stair-step price action like we experienced last year, stair-step upward trajectory rather than huge rocket upward trajectory like we saw. And so those two factors combined, are why Bitcoin is underperforming, in my view. I believe that once we get past the election, once we move past November 5th, and if the US can still avert recession, which by all accounts it's looking that we can, we did get a kind of a hot jobless claims print yesterday, but that is a weekly series. And so it's important to remember that that can be volatile. Markets are pricing in a growth rebound. So the 10-year yield is back on its way up. Gold is back on its way up. Petroleum is back on its way up. So investors are pricing in the fact that instead of a growth slowdown and recession, which would drive demand lower, which would push people into the 10-year U.S. Treasury bill and drive its yield lower, its yield is rocketing. 10-year U.S. Treasury note rather. Markets are estimating a growth rebound, not a growth slowdown, or even a recession. Recession risk is kind of off the table. Global liquidity is expanding because China just did this huge monetary bazooka, and on aggregate, global central banks are cutting rates at their fastest pace since 2007, if you exclude 2020, which was all of that emergency measures. So really, after this election, we have the most favorable macro backdrop. Well, currently we have the most favorable macro backdrop that Bitcoin has seen since 2020 and 2021, when we first crested those new all-time highs that we've since broken. But the election uncertainty is driving a lot of the underperformance that Bitcoin is experiencing right now. And so I believe that once we move past the election, Bitcoin will be able to benefit much more from that favorable macro environment than it is right now. So all things considered, that's kind of where my head is at. That's what my thesis is. There is some external short pressure on Bitcoin. People are trying to blow up MicroStrategy to no avail. Its stock is rocketing. People are also buying MicroStrategy in droves in order to kind of squeeze out those shorts. They're trying to make something like a GameStop 2.0. There certainly isn't that much short interest on MicroStrategy like there was with GameStop, but there is a considerable deal. People are trying to squeeze MicroStrategy out of their positions, and that probably involves a great deal of shorting MicroStrategy as well as selling Bitcoin or applying artificial short pressure to Bitcoin via futures contracts. So I believe that we do have that, but at the same time, Bitcoin front ran a lot of its gains this year. And so this was kind of the equilibrium price for the end of the year. That was probably inevitable, something like $75,000 to $80,000. And also heading into the election, there's a great deal of uncertainty. We have a very favorable macro environment with the Fed and other global central banks now cutting rates. Growth is back on the rise. People are expecting a growth reacceleration. And so Bitcoin can be the beneficiary of all of that once the election is in the rearview mirror, I believe.
What does Bitcoin track most closely in your opinion? Is it M2? Like what are you looking at when you're seeing the most highest correlation, I guess? What's some of the biggest factors you're kind of looking at just globally?
If you want the answer to that question right there and you like that spicy clip, check it out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. But if you want the full interview in its entirety, all the spicy clips put together, and you're not going to want to miss it, believe me, then check that out here. Come on, we'll see you in there. Good.